So when handling the new pod, I find once you've separated it out of the stack on site, is to grab 3 is a good number, depending on how strong you are, and you generally grab the 3 over your shoulder like that, walk it into the building site, and then you always want to lay it so it's upside down so you can separate easy. And it's easy as separating like that. I would suggest separating the 2, so this is quite easy to lay when you're on the building site. So when setting up your new pod, you always start with your starting pod as per the drawing, generally in a corner of a slab. You lay your full-size pod, in this case it's a 300. You make sure that it lands with your inside wire under the coupler. You lay your first pod. Your second pod is same process. You're basically just gonna lay that in place where the couplers are locking. Then when you get to the other side of the building, there's a chance that obviously a full pod's not going to fit. So what you need to use is our portion pods, which consists of 1/4 and 2/8. And this is where you maneuver this to use as per the drawing. In this case, you can see that we can't fit a full pod in, but if we take that 1/8 pod off, it's going to fit in the hole. And that's as simple as getting a handsaw, a knife, an angle grinder, it doesn't matter what you want to use, and you're just going to cut that 1/8 pod off. So now you're left with the 1/4 and the 1/8 pod and maintaining your 300mm wide beam. So now, not only do we have our full-size 300 pods and our portional 300s, but we have the same in the 225. So our full pod, which locks in well with the 300 series, as you can see, as well as still interlocking with your 300 pods. Now we also have our 225 pods in the same way. And the beauty about this is we can actually half pod a 300 pod and a 225 pod. Great for bracing walls, to create a thickening. Great for wet areas where you don't want to have a full pod wasting concrete. We can now half pod a 300 and a 225 pod over one full pod. But again, we still have the feet allowing for adjustment to any size. So again, it's a matter of just getting a saw in the 225, like that. And now you've got your 300 and your 225 with your adjusted beam size. So this is our 150 pod. It's very similar to the others, it interchanges, but it is a little bit different. As you can see, it's only a 1/4 pod. And we've done this because mostly used for wet areas, but can be used for outdoor areas. Basically, as it's a 1/4 size pod with 2/8, 4 of them make a full pod. And that's quite simple with either the full pod or the portion pods, whereas you're just putting basically your quarters together. And then in reverse with these cones, the cones allow it to fit into the back side of the other pod. You can still see your couplers all interlocked. And now you have a full-size pod in the 150 series, which can be removed for pipe penetrations for adjustability on site. So when we come across pipe penetrations, we need to obviously get around them. In this case, we can't fit a full-size pod, so this is where we have to use our portion pods. Now, when you're using your portion pods, sometimes you need to determine whether that way is the best or that way is a better way to fit. In this case, as we've got the pods going that way already, it's a matter of just cutting the pods as you need to and basically working around the pipes. So in this case, we can have a 1/4 pod there and an 1/8 pod on that side, and that way it gets around that pipe. And then we can have a 3/4 pod here to get around that pod, and that's basically done. And then same scenario here, the off-cut, this is the off-cut from that pod over there. We can utilise this to fit in this gap here under the trench mesh, and now we've also got around that third pipe. having a look at our portion pods, where it consists of 1/4 pod and 2/8 pods, which is the way the part is. Just highlighting though that even though this is 2/8, it's the same as a 1/4 pod. So if the drawing shows a 1/4, you can use 2/8. That way you don't have anything left over on site. If you do have offcuts, like you would over here with these offcut of those pieces, you can use them. So in this case, we could lay those pods in this direction and we can gobble up these 1/8 pieces like this. And that's simply by still having the coupler, which is at the end, which is the beauty, and it sits over the top with your trench mesh, if it's close enough. And that just folds over the top. So now what we've done is we're basically getting rid of any offcut that is on site, which is the beauty of the system, to make sure that nothing's wasted, every piece is used, and it still works great on site, minimal pieces.